Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Max Fry, as I was kindly introduced. I'm a series lead here at BBC News. In fact, we're a small part of BBC News called BBC Programme Partnerships, and we develop short-form documentary stories for BBC.com and our global audiences. Great to see some familiar faces. I think we've worked together in the past. There's a few people here, and certainly a few people across the meadow that we're in right now. And it's lovely to meet some new people as well. We're thrilled to be here. The context, if you hadn't seen Will's press release, is that BBC are partnering with Food Drink Europe to produce a series of short-form documentaries on the future of sustainable food systems in Europe. And we're incredibly excited and honoured to get the position to be able to deliver that. And that's coming to BBC.com early next year. So why are we here? It's a good question. I think for mostly, and via the sort of categorization over there, we're here to answer the question of how to tell your climate story. And there's good news and bad news, as there is with anything. The bad news is that telling stories is difficult, as you all probably know, as big brands. Brands have struggled telling stories for years, and it will be a problem that we continue to find, for the next couple of years until BBC has covered every single industry. But the good news is that we've got a formula. We've got something that we think works, and I'll give you a bit of an insight into what we think works during this session. How do we know? What is it our right to tell brands what to do when it comes to storytelling? Well, we're part of BBC News, which helps. Everything outside of the UK is what we cover. So we are truly global in our reach, and we have to cater for all sorts of different audiences when it comes to making content. We cover BBC.com for mostly, but obviously all the other news outlets and world service is under our remit too. We have a big old audience, about 468 million viewers per week across our different parts of our ecosystem, and 155 million online. Now, I'm not showing off by telling you that. It's important to understand that the online audience are sort of imperative to our success in trying to get people to change their opinions on certain topics, because we can collect data on them. We can track their behaviors and attitudes and interests over time, and it guides us on the sort of content that we create. And that audience is telling us loud and clear that consumers are looking for positive, clearly articulated responses to growing concerns, both social and environmental, that are undermining our quality of life. And I'm sure that the whole agenda today is going to cover these topics, but certainly packaging, as the tent over there will probably describe more eloquently than I can. Food scarcity, affordability, accessibility. I could go on for hours talking about this. It's all me and the team have done for the last 6 months or so. 7% of our global audience are foodies. I think that's really important. Thank God I'm saying foodies in a room of people who are in the industry, because outside of it doesn't mean much, I can tell you that. People have repeatedly shown a desire to go further and learn more about the issues that I mentioned above, and this group is only growing. It's really, really exciting. Since September of last year, COP26, of course, I'm sure many of you were there, we've seen our foodies audience grow by 350%. And for a broadcaster of our size, that is a lot of people. 66% of our audience online are interested in food and drink. Okay, that's interesting. 18% of them are specifically interested in veganism, which I think is a really good insight. That's something like 60% higher than other broadcasters. 46% purchased health foods, so foods specifically to address their health concerns in the past month within the BBC audience. And 51%, so the majority of people are more interested in buying organic goods than they are the cheap alternative. And I think all of that is sort of why we are so keen on producing this series. So the audience is there. That's not the issue. The problem is, of course, there's a lot of noise. All brands are telling their stories. There's all sorts of documentaries on environment and all sorts of documentaries on food systems and the climate. Loads of solutions out there. Everything feels complex and relatively unattainable. And this is all, of course, an environment, as we know very well, where content is becoming more snackable and attention spans are shortening, not to mention the fact that consumer trust, not to depress everyone, is probably at an all-time low. So we have the demand, we have the audience, we know the reasons, but how do we cut through the noise? How do we tell our climate story? And that, of course, is why you're all here. Excuse the preamble. So, firstly, before we get started, it's got to be a combined effort. I hope everybody knows that. That's the reason we're all here today. Governments, brands, innovation hubs, everyone needs to work together. There is no one answer. There's many right answers, and that's how we're going to be getting there. And that's certainly how we're going to be feeding 10 billion people by 2050. Everyone has heard the stat already. Storytelling's at the heart of this. And something I always like to say, which is incredibly cringy, is that it's less about the telling and more about the story. I apologize immediately for that. So we've spent the last 2 years or so gathering data on it's about 300 pieces of content across the bbc.com ecosystem. And here's what it's telling us. There's a few sort of key points to run through here before I sit down again. So, number one, focus on solutions. Sounds simple, it's something that people miss often. Our data on bbc.com shows us the audience are already generally aware that they need to be responsible, they've got to be sustainable. But the question isn't getting them motivated to do that, it's showing them how. Brands often miss the point in actually giving people realistic steps to achieving a more sustainable lifestyle and making the choices that a lot of brands, out of the best interest of the world and the environment, want them to make. Show scalability with your innovation. Show what the future is going to hold. People don't want to just do something once and then discard it and move on to the next thing. They want to commit to a vision and obviously include clear, call to actions, where to find out more information, so on and so forth. That's a given. Audience want plausible solutions. Understanding what there is out there is obviously important, but understanding how to do it is more so. We're not interested in greenwashing. That's a big part of this series, which we and certainly my compliance editor has been on to me for months now about. And don't hide away from the scale of the solution or the scale of the problem. Build curiosity, be authentic, and create something off the background of that. I've just been given the 3-minute warning, and I've got about 5 minutes left, Will. So, authentic voices and characters. This so often gets overlooked. You've got to bring people on stage that people are going to emotionally connect with. The climate crisis, topics of sustainability affects everyone. Neighbours, grandparents, friends, children, and people want to see that reflected on screen. You would be surprised to hear this, but the CEO isn't always the right person to have in these videos. Sometimes it's good to have employers or perhaps consumers. And for us, certainly in this series, we've got a lot of farmers, a lot of bioscientists that are contributing towards this. Brilliant story. Will forgive me, this will take a minute or so. We created a series on nursing a few months ago, and it was wonderful. We had lots of very good characters sort of fall at our fingertips, but one of the stories that we were doing was on period poverty in Uganda. And we struggled to find a character for a long, long, long time. It's in all the right places. We sort of spoke to the country manager, we looked in local schools and so on and so forth. And ultimately, we landed on a nurse. And this story that I'm about to say shows the quality and the importance of spending time understanding who the audience is and choosing a character that really is going to make a difference and isn't a sort of, corporate puff piece, but actually somebody who lives the reality of the solution every day. And the nurse was called Kevin. It's a male nurse in Uganda. That is quite outstanding if any of you have been to that part of Africa. And also a male nurse talking about period poverty. I mean, who would have thought, literally, the school children, when they saw Kevin put a pad on and pull up his knickers on top of his trousers, were crying with laughter, crying. And you know what was brilliant? The audience absolutely loved it. And it was one of our highest engaging films. And I think that shows the power of characters. Will, there's only 2 more points. So, voices that emotionally connect, I think we all understand that. Thirdly is think like a broadcaster. And I know that is certainly easier said than done because we're the BBC and it sounds like a given. However, take the viewer on a journey. Audiences want to be engaged, they want to be consulted. It's like reading a good book. You wouldn't skip to the last page, and quite often the middle chapters are the most interesting and the most intriguing. You've got to provide clear, practical motivations for why you're doing the act, not just saying we're going to be sustainable, but really showing why and what the steps are in the thinking behind such a program. And finally, create a sense of place. Characters are great. Characters in offices are less great. We want to root the story in a location with small, concentrated cast members. The best performing films prioritize things like sound design, drone shots, actuality. And for those of you who aren't in the industry, don't know what actuality is, it's just getting people quite simply to sit around a table unscripted and talk about the issue. Sometimes some of the best stuff that we have is off the back of that. Will's just told me I need to finish, so I'll wrap up. I think the main sort of takeaway from this, and I hope you understand, is look, be honest about things. Think about the journey that you're going on. And I think the first consideration always with a piece of content is ring the BBC. No, I'm only joking. The first thing to think about always is think about your audience. Think about your audience. How do you want them to feel? Don't think about how you're going to message it before you've even thought about the audience member and how you want them to get up off their laptop or off their phone in the morning and go and describe your program to their family and their colleagues. So I hope this has been informative. I hope you've learned something. And thanks very much to Will and the team.